All right, today we're opening up the Analyst Toolkit. We're going to dive into the big ideas that help us figure out why some countries are rich and democratic, while others, well, aren't. Let's jump right in.
Have you ever really stopped to think about it? Why are some countries so wealthy while others struggle? Why do some have free elections and others are run by dictators? These aren't just, academic questions. They're about real life for billions of people, and they get right to the core of how our world is put together.
And here's the cool part. There's an entire field of study for exactly this. It's called comparative politics. And honestly, the best way to think about it is like a toolkit. So today, let's open that toolkit and see what's inside. We're going to get you set up to do your own analysis.
Okay, so here's the game plan. First, we'll look at the state's blueprint. Then we'll meet the political players. After that, we'll jump into the big global debates. And to wrap it all up, we'll make sure your analyst toolkit is good to go. Sound good? Let's do it.
All right, Section 1. We're starting with the absolute basics, the foundation of it all. If you want to understand any country, you have to start with the state.
So the state, that's the core unit we're talking about. Countries like France or Brazil or Japan. But what is a state, really? Is it just a neutral referee making sure everyone plays by the rules? Or is it something else? Maybe a tool used by a specific class to hold on to power? Political scientists have a huge debate about this, and it's a really big deal for figuring out where power actually comes from.
So, okay, if the state is the playing field, then every game needs a rulebook, right? Well, that's the Constitution. It's the official guide, the blueprint that lays out exactly how power is supposed to be used. But you know what? Constitution is just words on paper if you don't have something called constitutionalism to back it up. What's that? It's the idea that the rules, the rule of law, apply to everyone, even the people in charge. It means you need judges who are independent and can't be pushed around. And it even covers what happens in an emergency, which, let's be honest, is often when those rules get bent or broken.
So, we have the rule book, but the kind of game being played? Oh, that can be completely different depending on where you are. And that brings us to the next big idea, political regimes.
And this is where things get really interesting. You can basically split regimes into two big camps. On the left, you've got your democracies. Some are pretty straightforward. You vote for people to represent you. Others are more participatory, where citizens get more of a direct say. But then look at the other side, the non-democratic regimes. This isn't just one thing. You've got everything from military dictatorships to totalitarianism, where the state wants to control everything. It just goes to show you, democracy and authoritarianism are really just the tip of the iceberg.
Okay, so we've got the blueprint down, the state, the rules. Now let's bring in the people. Who are the actual players in this game?
But before we talk about the obvious players, we got to talk about the power behind the scenes. You often hear analysts talk about a ruling class or power elites. What they mean are these small, super influential groups that can really shape what happens in a country. If you want to know why things are the way they are, you have to understand who these people are.
So who else is out there on the field? Well, you've got your political parties, of course. You've got powerful interest groups, lobbying for their slice of the pie. You've got massive social movements demanding change. And then you have NGOs and all kinds of grassroots campaigns. It's a really crowded and complex field with everyone trying to get their way.
And sometimes, when the pressure just builds and builds and the people in charge won't listen, you get the most extreme political event of all, a revolution. We're talking a complete, fundamental, and often violent reset of the entire system. The whole game gets flipped on its head.
All right, so we've got our state blueprint, we know who the players are, now we can finally put our tools to work on some of the biggest debates out there, and a huge one is development.
So for a long time, the dominant idea was something called modernization theory. It basically tells a pretty straightforward story. It says that for a country to become a democracy, it first has to get richer. You build factories, people move to cities, you get more educated, and boom, a middle class appears that then demands democracy. It's seen as a kind of natural progression. But then another theory came along and said, hold on a second. This is dependency theory. And it basically argues the whole global system is rigged. It says that because of history, especially colonialism, the rich core countries actually benefit by keeping the poorer peripheral countries, poor and dependent. It's a completely different way of looking at the problem.
So you see the clash here, right? You've got two totally different explanations for the same thing. Modernization theory says, look inside the country. Dependency theory says, no, you have to look at the whole global system.
And which of these tools you pick from your toolkit, it's going to completely change how you see global inequality.
Okay, so what about when a country actually tries to become a democracy? This whole process is called democratization, and it's usually a two-step dance. Step one is the transition. That's the messy part, getting rid of the old authoritarian regime. But just having one election, that's not the end of the story. Step two is the really hard part, consolidation. That's where you make sure democracy actually sticks, that the institutions are strong, and that it's not all going to fall apart.
Wow. Okay, we have covered a lot of ground here, from the state itself to social movements, all the way to these huge global theories. So, what's the big takeaway? Let's pack up our toolkit for the road.
Here's the most important thing. You now have a toolkit. That's it. All these concepts we've talked about, the state, regimes, modernization theory, these are the tools you can now use to start making sense of what's happening in the world, wherever you look.
And that's the real secret here. This toolkit isn't about giving you easy answers. Not at all. It's about empowering you to ask better questions. Like, is this political crisis really about a weak constitution? Is that country's democracy actually consolidated, or is it fragile? Who are the real players pushing for this change? That is what analysis is all about.
So I'll leave you with one last big question to try out your new toolkit on. We've spent all this time talking about the nation-state as the center of everything. But think about our world today. Giant global companies, the internet connecting everyone, international groups. Is the state actually losing its power? Is the real center of power shifting somewhere else entirely? Now that's something to think about.